Hey there folks, it's Jimmy Stewart here, hoping this is finding you all doing well. Today's video, our big Thanksgiving special, we're going to set up an acoustic guitar. Now I just happen to have a new FIrefly DAO2-F1 acoustic here that needs some setting up. Now you may have an acoustic that you've had hanging around the house, or maybe you just bought a new acoustic and you need to set up yours. So again, I'm going to show you what I do here in the studio for setting up an acoustic, which we haven't done here on the channel, so this is a good opportunity. You may have seen some of my other videos where we set up electric guitars. And acoustic's a little bit different in setting it up. And there's really four major areas when you're setting up an acoustic guitar that you want to pay attention to. First is strings. Now I know that sounds simple, but a lot of people will buy a new guitar and they will continue to play those factory strings, and they'll think to themselves, well, this doesn't really sound all that good, or I can't get the action that I really want. Or factory strings on the brand new guitars, folks, are not usually the best. And even if they are the best, they may have been sitting on that guitar for quite a long time. Now think about it. Fireflies come from China, so they've come all the way across the big pond there in the Pacific, and they're sat in a warehouse, and they got shipped in containers. And this particular guitar, if you go by the Firefly serial codes, this was manufactured in August of this year. So I just received this guitar last week, so it's 4 months that these strings have been sitting on there, and they're not terrible, but they're not exactly what I would prefer on that guitar. And that, in fact, might affect the action of the guitar, the tone of the guitar, and other things. And again, based on your acoustic, the best and first thing that I'm going to do is change the strings. Now, I've decided on this particular guitar, I'm going to use, I've used the D'Addario in the past, which are a very good string. These are the coated phosphor bronze XS. These were a 1253 set. Now I put those on my other Martin over there, and it likes it on there. But I'm going to go ahead and use on this particular guitar a set of Martin Lifespan SPs. I've had these for a while. These are also a very good string. These are also a coated string. These are the clear tones. But this is a little bit lighter set, which is what I think I want to prefer on this particular guitar. And this is a 11 to 52 phosphor bronze set of Martins. So I'm going to put these on the DAO2. Now that alone might help the action. Now for those that have not seen the review that I did on this guitar about a week ago, please check it out. Check out the link. This is the brand new DAO2-F1 from the good folks at Firebird Music and Firefly Guitars. Now when this came in, the action was set fairly high on this, which made it a little difficult to play. And any guitar that you get online, any guitar that's sent, like I said, in containers and what have you, that action is going to change as it goes through different humidity levels and through different temperature levels. This was set at 2.50 on the bass E string and 2.75 up on the high E string. That's too high. I want to try to get that down to around 1.50, maybe 2. But I'm hoping I can get this down to around about 1.50 on the high E, maybe 2 on the low E, or even a little bit lower, without it buzzing out and fretting out. And like I was explaining, 3 major areas on this guitar that you can work with, and you can do this at home. Again, if you're not familiar with it, or if you're too afraid to do it, or if, for instance, you don't have the tools to do it, I would suggest you bring it to a luthier or bring it to your guitar store that you trust and have them set it up for you. But this is not really all that difficult, and you can do it at home with a few things. If you have some screwdriver sets, if you have the Truss Rod Adjustment set, and that comes with the guitar. Usually these are all 4mm, and I have hundreds of them here. You can do this. You might require some oil and I oil all my fretboards, because when I take the strings off, that's a good opportunity to get that fretboard cleaned up and conditioned. I use Music Nomad F1. There's bunches of different ones that you can use, but this one I like because it does a good job. And then if you're looking at cleaning up these frets or cleaning up this bridge saddle, in the case that you might have to take it down a little bit, if you go to Lowe's, Home Depot, any of your home improvement stores, Ace Hardware, any of those kinds of places, get yourself a couple of sheets of 1000 grit sandpaper. This is good for, this is wet and dry abrasive paper. I do it all dry, but it's 1000 grit, as you can see here on the camera, and that's what I use to buff and clean and take out any burrs in my frets. It's also what I would use if I want to sand a saddle down just slightly, because on an acoustic guitar, again, you're not looking at a two-pneumatic type of bridge. You don't have individual string heights, so to actually raise or lower these string heights, you would have to do it from the bottom of the bridge. Now, we might not have to do that, but I'm thinking to get this guitar to where I'd like it, again, my preference, I may have to. So if we do, we'll do that in today's video. But the first thing we're going to do is look at these strings and restring it. The other areas of consideration is the nut and the nut height, the slots in the nut. Are those good? And you can check that simply by, I use a capo on the 3rd fret. And then I check the height from the string going over the 1st fret. Now usually I'd like to have that around 0.20, right around there, and you can use a feeler gauge or you can use a piece of paper. I have a gauge right here, and if that is correct, and again based on your neck relief and all that kind of good stuff, which is actually the first thing we're going to check to get it to where we want it. There is a gauge in here, and there it is right there. This is kind of oily, but I'm looking for that one right there. As you can see, that one's gold and all the other ones are silver. But that should be the right height, what we're looking for. And this is 0.25 millimeter. And that's kind of what you want between that top of that fret, and look at that, and the E string there. That could probably come down just slightly, but again, we'll do that when we do the truss rod adjustment on the neck, but that's actually pretty close. So that nut, and like I said, I already checked it by looks, was done very well. The nut slots look good. The nut is nice and rounded, and it is a bone nut on this particular guitar. So that's one thing you don't want to mess with unless you have to, because once you start cutting into the nut, you either cut it correctly or you're replacing the nut, okay? So you just want to be careful. Doesn't mean you can't do it, but you want to make sure you're doing it correctly, okay? So on this particular nut, though, I think we're going to be fine. I don't think there's anything we're going to have to do there. And again, once we do the truss rod, and there's another mystery on the truss rod. A lot of guitars, a lot of people don't like to mess with it. Well, it's not rocket science, folks. I mean, the truss rod is there for a reason, and it's there to either give relief or tighten that neck up to bring your strings into the correct height to make your guitar playable. And these guitars are made of wood. The necks are made of wood. The truss rod is a metal rod that goes up the neck and allows you to bring that neck into a bow, straighten it out, or give it a little bit of back bow or neck relief. And you kind of want a little bit of bow. You don't want it perfectly straight. I like to have a little bit of relief in that neck, so when you're looking down the neck like this, you're going to see just a slight bow, okay? And that allows you to have that action close to the fretboard without buzzing, but close enough to the board where when you play up here, you're not taking all the strength in your hand to play that chord, okay? You should be able to play it fairly comfortably without pushing those strings down and pushing them so hard to get them down to the fret to sound those notes, okay? And that's what you're looking for. You're looking at that compromise. You're looking to make the guitar playable for your style and playable for your hands and playable so that you get a good ring on the guitar and close enough to the fretboard that it feels comfortable to play. You're not pushing and stretching those strings down to make contact with the board, and you're not getting buzzing on the strings. Now people ask, what's the proper, and there's all kinds of tools out there and websites and YouTube videos that show you what they recommend to have at the 12th fret and what they recommend to have at the 1st fret. So on the 12th fret, what you're really looking for, again, it's based on your comfort level and what you like, but you're looking at around 5/64ths, and in my case, I like to go by the millimeter. I would like to see this at around 2 millimeter, and then maybe 1.5 to 2, and that would be comfortable for me, okay? On my electric guitars, that's usually around 1.5, 1.25. On an acoustic guitar, again, because you got wider strings, heavier strings, you don't want it too close, because that string will vibrate and be buzzing off the frets. So you want it close enough to play comfortably, but still ring out true. Like I said, this guitar is a little too high. So I think with a set of strings, I believe these are probably strung with 12s. It's probably a 12 to, I don't know, probably what this Diodario set is. It's probably around 12 to 53. I'm going to string it with these acoustic lights. This is a custom light set from Martin, and this is an 11 to 52. So just by stringing it with a little bit lighter gauge string, that should even help bring the action down because, again, not as much tension on the neck. So we're going to try that first. We're going to put strings on it, and I'm not going to bore you with all that. You've seen me restring guitars, and I'm sure you know how to restring a guitar. So I'm going to go ahead and restring this, and when I have the strings off, I'm going to clean up this fretboard, condition it with the F1. I'm going to hit these frets just to buff them up. I'll even check with a fret rocker to make sure there's no issues, and I don't think there is because I don't feel anything at all. But I'm going to check it while I have the strings off, and we'll go from there. I'm going to go ahead and get this restrung, and then we'll come back and see where we are. Hey there, folks. I just wanted to show you. I just cut these strings off of here, and I wanted to show you the fretboard. And prior to getting this cleaned up and conditioned, I just wanted to show you how this looks. You can see it's pretty dry and kind of dirty. So we're going to clean that up and go from there before we actually restring it. I'm also going to, now you can see on this nut here, as the tension went away, the nut wasn't even glued in, and you know, that's fine. But as soon as I took the tension off those strings, that nut comes right out. So we'll put a little dab of glue right on there, just a little dab to hold that when we go to restring it. And then down here on this end, I do want to pull this bridge. Maybe I'll show you that in the next section. Once I get all these strings off, I'm going to go ahead and pull that bridge and show you what's in there, okay? All right. Okay, so this was the second cleaning, and all I did here was I used a fret buffer. I've got this one here. And again, this is a cheapo off of Amazon. It wasn't very expensive. And I just hit those frets using a fret protector, like so. And I just buff those down to get them nice and clean. And then on the other end is the actual buffer part. This is more of a, it's more gruff. And then this is sort of a buff wheel type thing where you can just buff them down. So I just did that on the frets, and as you can see, it's looking very, very good. And oiled it up, and cleaned up that fretboard. So why I had this off, I wanted to show you this nut, folks. This is the bone nut from there. Now you can see how those slots were done and how they're slanted back towards the headstock, which is the angle of those strings going back towards the peg head, towards the tuning pegs, which is what you want to see. They're slotted back, and you can see that this bone nut was cut very, very well. It just wasn't secured into the guitar at all. They didn't use, normally, I mean, I've seen that before. In the string tension holds the nut in, but I am going to put a dab of glue on this when I put it back. But I just wanted to show you how nicely this nut was done. Again, it's a bone nut, and the slots all look good. They measured good, and it's cut nicely. No sharp edges. It's a nice job. Well, now while I have this out, I wanted to show this to you as well. This is the actual bridge. There was no spacer under there. Let me show you the guitar because it's hanging here. So you can see there was no spacer in there. Again, I'm letting that oil soak into that neck. And here, this is actually a bone bridge as well, and it is a compensated bone bridge. I don't know if you can see that in the camera. There's where your B string sits, there's where your E string sits, and the G string. Kudos to FIrefly for putting in some quality nut and quality bridge anyway. Very nice. Now you can see what I've done. I've marked this, and I've marked at 4mm. That's for me to use as a guide if I need to shim this down a little bit, if I need to sand this down to get the action to where I want it. That's my cutoff line. I don't want to go any further than that. And normally I would take, depends, if I can get the truss rod adjustment and get the correct relief on the neck, we might not have to touch this at all. But if I can't, if I can only get it so far, then I will shave this down, and we'll find that out as I restring it and see where we're at. Now in this, folks, I just took a tiny bit of Elmer's carpenter's wood glue, just your standard Elmer's, and put just a slight bit on the nut. And we're going to go ahead and set this nut back in. Like so. Making sure that it's lined up perfectly. And sit down into the slot correctly. And there we go. Now I'm going to let the rest of that oil soak in. Everything's good. Everything's perfectly level. No rocking whatsoever. Okay, so here is the guitar ready for strings. I've got the bridge back in place. The compensated bone bridge. Again, we haven't shaved that yet. Under here is where the truss rod adjustment is, and this is going to be the next step after putting strings on here. We've checked the frets. We've checked the nut. And I did dab a little bit of Elmer's on there. Again, I'll show you. I just used your standard Elmer's Carpenter's wood glue. Just a little bit of dab on there just to hold that in. Again, there was nothing on that. There was just a string tension holding it. And that's all set. Frets have been polished. Neck has been cleaned. Fretboard has been cleaned and conditioned. And we're going to go ahead and string this. And to string this guitar today, we're using the Martin Lifespan SPs. This is a Fosper bronze set. They were 11 to 52, and this is a custom light set made by Martin. They are still stretching. I just put these on about 10 minutes ago before I put the camera back on. But they sound very, very good. And believe it or not, just by changing the gauge of the strings, dropping it down, I think one gauge, I think those were 12s that were on it. But just by changing the strings now, I can tell a big difference. So I'm at about 2.0, between 2.0 and 2.25 now, instead of 2.50 or 2.75, which is where I was. And this is at around 2.25. So it's pretty even now, and it's dropped down considerably as far as the action goes up here. Just by putting a gauge of strings on it. Now I'm going to go ahead and adjust this truss rod. That's the next step after changing strings. Again, you got three different things you want to be concerned with, and outside of putting the set of strings that you like on your guitar. And again, when I change strings, that's when I also treat the fretboard and clean it up, and I buffed out those frets. I checked the frets for anything high or low, and they were all fine. I did put a dab of glue on this nut to hold that nut in when I take the strings off next time. There was no glue on there at all. The nut just came, as you saw, the nut just came right off as soon as I unstrung it, took the tension off. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to adjust this truss rod. Now, truss rods, again, don't be afraid of them, folks. They're there. It takes a lot to break a truss rod or throw your thing off completely. There's no huge secret to it. Again, if you want to tighten the neck up, it's righty-tighty, lefty-loosey. Again, looking from the direction that you're looking at. So if I was looking down on this guitar like this, and the truss rod adjustment was here, it would be righty-tighty, lefty-loosey. In this particular guitar, and a lot of acoustics, the truss rod adjustment is up under here on this end of the neck. This should be a 4mm. Again, they send a truss rod adjustment with this, and you want to do this with some tension on your strings. You want to do it with tension, if you can, obviously. A lot of guitars, like the older Strats and stuff like that, you actually have to take the neck off to do this. So obviously, you wouldn't have tension on the strings. But what you do is you take the neck off, do your adjustments as you feel it needed, put the neck back on, string it up to tension, and then see where you are, and then repeat. So it can get pretty involved with something like that. On this particular guitar, I'm just going to bring this up slightly, and that should again bring my strings down slightly towards the fretboard. So I'm going to go righty-tighty. And you heard it just go just then. Again, that was only a little bit of a tweak. I'm going to try to get a little bit more grip on this by moving the strings kind of out of the way so I can start over on this side. Maybe I'll start here, get a little better. Here we go. About 1/8 of a turn, 1/4 of a turn. Oh wow, I mean just that alone, folks. I can see the difference. 1.75 now on the bass E and 1.75 on the high E. Just about a quarter turn did that. That changed the tuning obviously a little bit. Intonation is looking good. And again, you don't want to just check the 12th fret. You want to check the intonation on your 5th, on your 3rd, on your 7th, because that's the majority of where you're playing here. You obviously want to check your harmonic and at the 12th fret. You're not going to be playing much up here, okay? So the idea is to get your intonation as close as possible, within about 3 cents, and in tune in the areas and the things that you're going to be playing on there. So it looks good. And again, the strings are still stretching a bit. That had been almost impossible to play on this guitar a week ago. The action was just too high up here for me to be able to do that. And the strings are still stretching just slightly, but I'm going to leave it at that for right now, folks. I could probably get that down a little bit further, but it is playing very nice now. Again, for an acoustic, if you look at the back of one of these rulers, it'll actually tell you too, the suggested the type of instrument, acoustic guitar that, you know, on the 6th string, they recommend between 2.0 and 2.5 millimeter. On the 6th string, and 1.5 to 2 millimeter on the 1st string. So I'm well within that range. In fact, I'm a little lower, which is good. With no fret buzz. Again, they recommend 2 to 2.5, and I am 1.75 and 1.75. So I'm pretty happy with that, considering how high it was. It was at 2.75. Now it's at 1.75. With just a small tweak of the truss rod and a lighter gauge set of strings. I did not have to do any type of sanding on the saddle. Again, that's good. Nor did I have to do any slot adjustments on the nut. I just had to put a piece of, just a small dab of glue on there, just to hold that. But those are the areas of concern when you're setting up your acoustic guitar. Strings, the type of gauge that you would like to have, and, you know, based on kind of what you'd be playing. Again, a set of 11s is fairly standard. 12s are fairly standard. Higher than that, you're talking heavy gauge string. Lower than that, and you're talking a lighter gauge string on an acoustic guitar. So around 11s is about where most people would settle in. 11 to 53s. You can go lighter, you'll get a thinner sound. The actual setup, what you're looking at really is the three basic things. Your truss rod, and again, this has got just a small amount of relief. I took some out by tightening it up. I could probably take a little bit more, but I'm going to let it set for today. And so your truss rod, the nut and the height of your nut slots, again, using a 3rd fret, you should have around 0.20 to 0.25 millimeter in your 1st fret to nut height. Again, based on what you like, but you don't want it fretting out, but you don't want it having so much tension that you can't push down that 1st fret, and when you do push down that 1st fret, everything is out of tune. So again, it's a compromise, getting it to how you like to play and how it feels. Okay, you shouldn't have to mash down to get that 1st fret to play. Okay. Again, the more you have to hold that string down and mash it down because of so much height here, the more it's going to be out of tune, the more it's going to add tension to the string. So you don't want to have that. That's important, is having that nut string height to the 1st fret. From the nut, the bottom of the nut slots to that 1st fret is only a few thousandths of an inch. So again, you don't want it too low because you'll be fretting out. And if you want it too high, the intonation and playing the guitar is going to be tough because you're going to be pushing down so hard here. You're going to be stretching that string to try to get it to fret there. So the truss rod, very, very important. It's there for a reason. I usually adjust my guitars 2 or 3 times a year. In the summertime, I usually have to add a little relief because as the wood swells and the humidity in the air becomes more, the wood will expand. In the wintertime, in these types of seasons, as you know, I'll run a humidifier in the studio. I want to try to keep that humidity between 40 and 55% if I can. And in the summer, the same way, I run a dehumidifier. And again, you're especially on acoustic guitars, they will be very helpful to you if you can maintain that kind of humidity level so they don't shrink up and swell up. And they're going to anyway, but not to the extreme. Okay, so when it gets very, very dry in the winter months, when you're running your heat, the wood will contract. And in those cases, you'll start to see your guitars, if you have them hanging or if on stands, they'll start to go flat on you. So, adjusting that truss rod seasonally, your guitars will love you for it because it does help. Again, you don't want to just crank it down like a monkey, all right? You want to just take it righty-tighty, lefty-loosey, 1/8 to 1/4 of a turn at a time, and see what you got. It doesn't take much. And you watched me just now with about a 1/4 turn, brought my action down on this guitar about 1 millimeter, which was wonderful. And it works quite nicely. Then the other area of concern is your bridge. Now, on acoustic guitars, you don't have an adjustable saddle to raise your individual strings up and down. So if for some reason you had to raise this up because it was fretting out up top, or if you had to bring it down because it was way too high and truss rod adjustment can only bring it so far, then you can actually just take that saddle out take a piece of sandpaper, put it on a block or on a table, and just shave it down little by little by little. Place it back in there and see where you are. I didn't have to do it on this one. I was going to, but I didn't have to. Just the truss rod adjustment was enough to bring it right in. So I'm very happy with that. So I'm going to call it a day on this one, I think, there, folks. Hopefully that'll help you out. If you have an old acoustic sitting at the house and you haven't touched it, you haven't changed the strings on it because it's too hard to play, get a little lighter gauge set of strings, clean it up, go in there and adjust that truss rod and see if you can't get it to where it's actually level with just a slight bit of relief in that neck, and then see what you got. You might have to adjust your saddle. You might have to adjust the slots on your nut. And if you do, take your time, do little by little, and you can bring that acoustic guitar into a playable level. Anyway, get it set up to how you like to play, and get that acoustic guitar back in your hands. So for today, folks, we're going to wrap it up. For the subscribers here in the U.S., a very safe, healthy, and happy Thanksgiving to you all, and to your families and loved ones. Take care of yourselves, okay? And to the subscribers and people that maybe haven't subscribed, if you're still on the fence about subscribing, come over to the good side, folks. Would love to have you on board here on the channel. So until next time, folks, it's Jimmy Stewart saying so long, take care, stay safe, stay healthy, and we'll talk to you all again very, very soon. Bye-bye for now.